You're listening to a production of the National Media Archive. To learn more or volunteer, go to nationalmediaarchive.com.
American Psycho remains a cultural touchstone, even more than 2 decades after its release. Every time you scroll through platforms like YouTube, Twitter, or Instagram, it's hard not to see the face of Patrick Bateman staring back at you. The film's memes, absurdly, continue to spread like wildfire, drawing attention from new generations of viewers. But the reason this film remains so pervasive isn't just because of its shock value. It's because American Psycho speaks to something deeper, something that's as relevant now as it was when it was first released. It taps into the psyche of men in a way few films do. It makes us question what's real and what's fabricated in our everyday lives. The film isn't just a story about a sociopath, it's a warning. A warning about the consequences of living behind a mask, of playing a role for the world while your true self withers away in the background. It dives headfirst into the hollowness of modern society, exposing the emptiness of towering skyscrapers, soul-crushing office spaces, and a culture of conformity. It shows us a world where everyone is wearing the same mask, saying the same things, having the same opinions, and ultimately feeling disconnected and lost. This is the absurdity of the postmodern era. It's a time when our personalities, opinions, and real selves are buried under the weight of societal pressures. American Psycho isn't just a film. It's a critique of a world that's more about appearances than authenticity. The story begins in a high-end restaurant where the waiters are all reciting the same scripted lines, offering the same menu options, showing how even the most mundane interactions in the film are saturated with artifice. Patrick Bateman and his Wall Street associates sit at a table, indulging in a shallow, trivial conversation about nothing of real substance. This opening scene sets the stage for everything that follows. No one knows anyone else. These characters don't see each other. They only see the facades they've put up. This mask-wearing is the core theme of the movie. Bateman and his colleagues live in their bubbles, disconnected from any real human connection, each one trapped in their own self-created illusions. Soon enough, Bateman heads to a nightclub where another layer of his persona is revealed. While ordering a drink, he encounters a cold, unresponsive bartender. Here, the film blurs the lines between reality and fantasy, as Bateman's internal monologue runs wild. His rage at the bartender becomes a metaphor for his fractured psyche, a commentary on how these men suppress their true feelings. The bar scene is a perfect example of what American Psycho is all about, the tension between the public persona and the shadow self. The film explores the ancient trope of personas versus the shadow, a conflict that's been represented in everything from biblical tales of angels and demons to the yin and yang of Eastern philosophy. The movie is essentially about the journey of self-actualization through the discovery of the shadow. And for Bateman, the discovery of his darker side is inevitable. Throughout the film, the character's public persona, his polished, perfect exterior, becomes increasingly absurd, a mask that can no longer be maintained. In one infamous scene, Bateman's daily beautification routine is revealed. Layers of conditioners, exfoliators, ice packs, and gels, a meticulous process that highlights the ridiculous effort it takes to maintain this plastic public image. The message is clear. We expend so much energy crafting the perfect version of ourselves for the world, but underneath it all, there's nothing real. The authentic self is buried under layers of carefully constructed facades, and in Bateman's case, the mask is all that exists. He isn't real. He's just an illusion, a projection of what society expects him to be. The sterile, monotonous world Bateman inhabits is perfectly reflected in the city around him. Skyscrapers and office buildings that are all carbon copies of each other. Offices that look the same, with the same artificial lighting and the same people talking the same way. The visual design of American Psycho is deliberate, capturing the soul-crushing repetition of modern urban life. Bateman's world is a place where you're forced to wear a mask, show up to a job you hate, and pretend to care about people you don't even know. The emptiness of it all is overwhelming, and this hollow existence is the breeding ground for Bateman's psychosis. The film doesn't just criticize the emptiness of modern life. It exposes how this lack of genuine human connection leads to an erosion of our true selves. In a culture that prioritizes conformity and material success above all else, Bateman's repression of his shadow self grows more intense. And in the process, he loses any sense of authenticity or meaningful expression. The film warns us that when we sacrifice our true selves in pursuit of societal approval, we become shells of who we truly are. And that's exactly what Bateman represents. A man who is trapped in a world that doesn't allow for real self-expression. He's been taught that aggression, violence, and defiance of societal conventions are wrong. But in the world of American Psycho, these things are the only means of self-development. Bateman's world is one that rewards material conformity and punishes any attempt to step outside the box. He isn't allowed to express his frustrations or his desires without consequences. So he resorts to extreme measures to release his pent-up aggression. And this is where the story takes a darker turn. The story moves into a scene with Patrick Bateman and his fiancée, which offers a sharp commentary on relationships in a world dominated by superficial appearances. Their connection is clearly hollow, a mere social mask designed to fit in with the corporate culture around them. It's a hollow ritual. Their night out, which is supposed to represent a normal social event, quickly turns into just another exercise in conformity. Bateman's indifference to his fiancée's drugged-out behavior and his affair with another woman exemplifies the emptiness of their relationship. They're both just going through the motions, playing their roles in this sterile, emotionless world. The absurdity of the situation becomes even more apparent when Bateman gives a corporate speech about racial and gender equality. He parrots the usual platitudes about traditional values and civil rights, spouting the kind of social justice rhetoric that's expected in the circles he moves in. Yet, behind these words, Bateman's real life is a complete contradiction. He's having affairs, doing drugs, and engaging in violent fantasies. His outward persona, polished, politically correct, and socially concerned, doesn't match the truth of his private actions. The hypocrisy is glaring, and it's this dichotomy that the film continues to unravel. The most telling example of this hypocrisy comes when Bateman, after touting the virtues of moral values, has an outburst at a laundromat. He screams at the workers, completely losing his composure. It's here that we witness Bateman's shadow side starting to break through. For a moment, the mask slips. The polished, perfectly coiffed Bateman disappears, and what's left is a man who is barely holding it together. But this break in character doesn't last long. The moment he's confronted with another person in the same social strata, his facade returns. He goes back to being the smooth, corporate stooge that everyone expects him to be. It's a biting commentary on how hollow and artificial the expectations of the modern corporate world can be. This theme of the mask slipping and revealing the true self is repeated throughout the film, especially in one of its most iconic scenes, the business card scene. Bateman and his colleagues are at a dinner, and they all compare business cards. The cards are identical, the job titles are the same. The only thing that separates them is the slightly different font or paperweight. And yet, for Bateman, this becomes a source of obsession. He nearly has a breakdown over a colleague's slightly thicker card. This moment is a perfect reflection of how the pursuit of status, image, and trivial differences consumes these people. There's no individuality. Everyone is the same. The hunger for distinction in such an indistinguishable world becomes maddening. Bateman's obsession with the minutiae of these superficial markers of success is a window into his deteriorating mental state. The next scene, in which Bateman assaults a homeless man, is a dramatic manifestation of his frustration with this sterile, conformist world. His desire for power, control, and recognition drives him to commit an act of extreme violence against someone who exists outside of the social structure Bateman inhabits. In a world where everything is about fitting in, this act of brutality serves as an attempt to reaffirm Bateman's ego and his place within that hierarchy. His violent actions aren't just an expression of anger. They are also a desperate plea for identity in a world that denies him the ability to truly express himself. By asserting dominance over a homeless man, Bateman is essentially trying to reassert his place in a world that he feels is slipping away from him. And this is where the film takes its most profound turn. The sterile world Bateman inhabits has become unbearable for him, and the mask he wears is no longer enough to keep him tethered to reality. The Christmas party scene highlights the absurdity of this culture even more. It's a gathering of people who are completely disconnected from each other, all fixated on their own small, self-serving agendas. Bateman is disgusted by the emptiness of it all, and this disgust becomes palpable as his mask starts to slip further. The conversation at the party centers around trivial matters, business deals, superficial pleasantries. Bateman's growing unease is evident as he realizes the meaningless nature of the social structures he's been trapped in. As the party goes on, Bateman's mask begins to unravel completely. He invites Paul Allen, a man he's been obsessed with, out for dinner, but only to serve his own agenda. Bateman's internal battle becomes more evident as his true thoughts start to bubble to the surface. They get more and more inebriated, and Bateman's feelings of inferiority begin to surface, especially when Paul Allen seems more successful, more confident. Bateman's outward mask becomes more strained, more difficult to maintain. The breakdown continues as Bateman drags Paul Allen's dead body into his car. The absurdity of the situation is emphasized by the complete lack of concern from his colleagues. One of them even asks where he got the overnight bag, ignoring the fact that Bateman is carrying a dead body in it. This scene perfectly sums up the mind-numbing triviality of Bateman's world, where people are so absorbed in their own little bubbles that they don't even notice something as obvious as a murder taking place right in front of them. As the story reaches its climax, Bateman's mental state deteriorates. The killings become more extreme, but no one seems to care. He shoots police officers, kills people in his way, and does everything he can to lash out. But despite the chaos, the world around him remains unchanged. The film suggests that Bateman's violent outbursts are not real. They're an exaggerated fantasy, a way for him to express the anger and frustration that has been building up inside him for so long. In his mind, these outbursts are his way of releasing his pent-up aggression, of breaking free from the constraints of a society that doesn't allow for true self-expression. As the film draws to a close, Bateman's breakdown reaches its boiling point. He places a final phone call to his lawyer, desperate for recognition. He insists that he's Patrick Bateman, but his lawyer doesn't even acknowledge him. The lawyer doesn't care. No one does. It's the culmination of everything that American Psycho has been building toward. Bateman's desperate need for validation and his complete inability to get it. His entire life, his public persona, is built on a mask that no longer fits, and the people around him have no interest in the truth beneath it. They're too wrapped up in their own superficial lives to care about anything real, and Bateman's struggles are lost in the noise. This ending is both chilling and profound. Bateman's collapse is not accompanied by the expected chaos. Instead, it's met with indifference. The people around him continue their shallow conversations, oblivious to his mental unraveling. This is the real horror of American Psycho, the emptiness of a world where no one cares about authenticity, about human connection, or about individuality. Bateman's identity has been erased by the system he so desperately tried to fit into. In the end, all he is left with is the facade he spent so much time perfecting. And the tragedy is that no one, not even Bateman himself, can tell the difference between the mask and the man underneath. This bleak conclusion is the film's greatest statement. It's not just about the horrors of one man's psychosis, it's about the horrors of a society that encourages us to hide behind masks, to conform, and to repress our true selves. American Psycho holds a mirror up to the culture of consumerism, materialism, and corporate conformity. It shows us what happens when we allow these forces to strip away our identity and force us into an endless cycle of self-repression. The violence, the insanity, the brutality, all of it is a direct result of the system's failure to allow genuine self-expression. Throughout the film, Bateman's behavior becomes more erratic, more extreme. He lashes out in violent ways toward women, the homeless, his colleagues, because these are the people who he feels are beneath him in the social order. But his aggression isn't just about power. It's about reclaiming control over a world that is crushing him under the weight of its expectations. Bateman's descent into madness is a metaphor for what happens when we try to suppress every part of our true selves in favor of fitting into a conformist society. At its core, American Psycho isn't just a film about a man who loses his grip on reality. It's a warning. It shows us what happens when a culture becomes so obsessed with external appearances and material success that it completely erodes the inner self. It highlights the dangers of repression, of losing touch with who you truly are in order to fit in with the expectations of a society that values nothing more than conformity. The idea of the looking glass self, a concept developed by sociologist Charles Cooley, plays a critical role in understanding Bateman's psychological state. According to Cooley, people develop their sense of identity through the perception of others. Essentially, we shape who we are based on how others view us. In Bateman's world, the feedback he receives from others is shallow, superficial, and devoid of any meaningful interaction. He is surrounded by people who care more about status, money, and outward appearances than about authentic connection or personal expression. As a result, Bateman's sense of self is hollowed out. His identity is shaped entirely by the perceptions of those around him. And because those perceptions are so skewed and disconnected from reality, Bateman becomes lost. In a world that constantly demands conformity, Bateman becomes increasingly invisible. He is trapped in a cycle of self-repression, unable to express his true feelings or desires. The more he tries to maintain his public persona, the more detached he becomes from any real sense of self. This erasure of identity leads to feelings of emptiness and nihilism. Bateman's violent outbursts are a direct response to this emptiness. They are the manifestation of his suppressed inner self, his shadow, that he can no longer control. The idea of the shadow self, central to American Psycho, is rooted in the work of psychologist Carl Jung. Jung argued that everyone has a shadow, the unconscious part of the personality that contains all the traits and emotions we repress because they don't align with societal expectations. Bateman's shadow self is the part of him that is angry, violent, and completely detached from moral norms. Over the course of the film, we see this shadow gradually overtake him. He tries to suppress it, but as the film progresses, the repression becomes more intense, more dangerous. His violent acts are an attempt to release this pent-up aggression, to finally allow his true self to emerge. But in doing so, he only sinks further into madness. Bateman's behavior, his erratic outbursts, his violent fantasies, his extreme acts of aggression, are all symptoms of this internal struggle. He is trying to express his anger, his frustration, his deep sense of disconnection from the world around him. But instead of finding meaningful ways to release these emotions, he turns to destructive outlets: murder, drug abuse, sex, and other forms of hedonism. These acts of violence are his only way of breaking free from the suffocating culture of conformity. In the end, American Psycho serves as a cautionary tale. It warns us about the dangers of living in a world that values conformity over authenticity. It shows us the consequences of repressing our true selves in favor of a mask that society demands we wear. And ultimately, it tells us that when we suppress our shadow selves for too long, it's not just our identity that's at risk, it's our sanity. Bateman's breakdown is the result of a culture that demands perfection and punishes individuality. The emptiness of his life, the hollowness of his relationships, and the violence he resorts to are all part of the same larger pattern of repression that we see mirrored in our own world today. American Psycho isn't just a movie about one man's descent into madness. It's a film about all of us. It's a reflection of a society that's increasingly obsessed with appearances and material success. And it serves as a stark warning about the cost of ignoring the most important aspects of human existence: self-expression, connection, and authenticity.